Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar. Today, we'll be covering aids to the travel and tourist sector. This is the second of our series of talks, which are going to lead up to the main forum, which will be held in the town of Vigevano next spring. Our first talk last week was extremely successful and covered the topic of liquidity and aids to corporations. I would like to welcome today's speakers who are all active in the tourist sector. Mr. Stefano Tassis, Head of Tourism in the town of San Pellegrino. Mr. Paolo Corbini, Director of the National Association Città del Vino. Mr. Marcello Astori, General Manager Zani Viaggi Group. Mr. Roberto Micera from the National Research Council, Mr. Yossi Wircer, who is the owner of Hotel Development Europe, and finally Mr. Arben Shkodra, Secretary General of the Albanian Manufacturer Union. We're going to kick off with our first speaker. Our first speaker today is Mr. Tassis, to whom I would like to ask, what are the initiatives and the strategies that your administration in San Pellegrino is putting in place in order to support the tourism sector? Tourism is by far the most important topic for our town, the town of San Pellegrino. The administration has been actively working on this field for several years, and tourism in San Pellegrino area actually goes back a very long time, as our town was actually one of the most popular destinations in the Bergamo area, and we've been actively trying to return to those glorious years. Tourism has changed, of course, and we need to figure out the best strategies to apply today. We are aware that we have a town with great potential, including an internationally recognized brand such as the San Pellegrino Water Company. The San Pellegrino Water Company is a very rooted institution here that we work very, very actively and very closely with. And this is actually the company that is spreading the name of our valley and our town around the world. We are also working very closely with other local businesses that are very active on the territory. Tourist-wise, I would like to mention the Zani Group, one of the most important tour operators in the country. So we are very, very lucky in this sense to be able to work with a lot of different companies that are so interested in working with us. We've been working on different areas, of course. We have a partnership going on with some of the most important hotels in the area in order to host football teams for their summer pre-championship retreats, as well as other sports such as martial arts or volleyball. And all of the guests of the San Pellegrino Hotel have a free access to the city's gyms and sport facilities. And we're actually getting a great feedback on that. So this is all about trying to work on all of the different areas that can actually bring some kind of benefit to our town. Another major element that we need to work on is cultural tourism. And I'm very proud to say that two of the most important liberty monuments in Europe are here. And thanks to our partnership with Terme, our town, San Pellegrino, has managed to rapidly improve its situation, its tourist situation, with around 200,000 visitors per year. The length of visitors' stays also changed drastically. Back in the days, we had fewer people coming to our town who used to come and stay longer. And it is actually the other way around right now. It's the other way around today. Now we actually have more people coming who stay for fewer days. They stay shorter. And it's very, very important to focus on that trend. We need to understand what visitors' trends are, and we need to understand what we need to do in order to stimulate visitors to stay longer. The pandemic has changed everything again. Of course, the hotel sector has been heavily damaged by the pandemic, and we've tried our best to provide the support that we could. Last summer, we decided to change our strategy a little bit according to the situation that was brought about by the pandemic. And we decided to develop some areas of the valley where they were not so popular until the year before. We opened some new trails for hikers and bikers. And generally speaking, we really have to try our best in order to adjust our offer according to nowadays kind of tourism, which is different from what it used to be. Our local administration is determined to bring San Pellegrino back where it belongs. And I do believe that this goal can only be reached through a deep collaboration between the public and the private sector. Investing in tourism is sometimes very hard because of the lack of immediate return on the investment. And therefore, the public sector must provide some fundamental services such as info points. For example, we have 82 recognized info points across the valley, and that's a very, very important service that we provide to our visitors who are never lost. And we are lucky enough to have a very committed private sector as well here. And so that is, I believe, the road that we must take and that we must walk on. And it's the road that we're very open to work for. San Pellegrino needs everybody's help and everybody's support. And only by working together, we will be able to bring this town back where it deserves to be. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Councillor, for your very kind and clear remarks. We are now moving on to our second speaker, Mr. Paolo Corbini, who is the director of the National Association Città del Vino, to whom we would like to ask to tell us a little more about what this project is about and what kind of actions you are organizing in this period. Well, good evening, everybody. Let me start by thanking the organizers for the opportunity to describe our association. Our association gathers around 500 members in Italy, towns, local authorities, and businesses all together. We were founded on the 21st of March 1987. We therefore have a relevant experience in the sector, and we cooperate with towns and villages in order to implement development projects with them that are related to the wine sector and the lands of wine. Over the years, we have equipped ourselves with some tools that help us to do our job. The very last survey that we carried out was back in 2019, and it provided some pretty interesting data to analyze. as we had a turnover of around 2.6 billion euros and 15 million people who showed some kind of interest in the wine sector. Some of them as a lifelong passion and some others as a shorter term curiosity, with a daily expenditure which ranged between 80 and 150 euros per person. COVID, of course, COVID has put a drastic end to this entire business flow. And of course, we're now all supposed to roll up our sleeves and get back on track altogether in order to reboost this sector, which was heavily hit by the pandemic. We have observed over the past few months that the wine tourism sector has actually been able to sustain itself much better than other sectors, thanks to the summer season, of course, and the deep association of this sector to the outdoor life. And this is an aspect that is definitely worth thinking about. It's definitely worth considering. But the positive results which we have reached are clearly not enough to face the cold season which is approaching and which is definitely going to be very, very hard. From our perspective, we believe it's very, very important to provide some of the EU fundings to the agricultural and the agri-food sector, where wine, of course, plays a fundamental part. And we must give the opportunity to the territories to be involved in this process, to be protagonists in this process. We have some beautiful areas in the country with some great wine and some great wine producers that are completely unknown to the public. And we can no longer afford this kind of loss. Investing in infrastructures will be fundamental. Infrastructures will need to increase and enlarge and expand their accommodation capacity. Italian wineries, which are at least 33,000, must be put in the condition to host guests. And for many of those, this is not the case yet. We are extremely interested in studying with local authorities, in collaborating with local authorities and understanding with them what can be done in this new challenge in this specific sector, which, of course, adds a remarkable value to each given territory. Our job is to provide the necessary advices and tools, to provide the necessary know-how to each town and villages that will want to cooperate with us, especially to the most rural areas, in order for them to be aware of the great potential that they have and to help them understand how to fully take advantage of this potential from a practical point of view, such as landscape conservation, vineyard protection, and so on. For example, one of the most important events that is set every year, that we organize every year, is a wine contest, which is held in a different location every year. And the aim of this event is to enhance the given territory where it is held, as well as enabling the smaller producers to gain the attention they need and to acquire some sort of national and international recognition. And I think all these elements must be combined. We do believe that wine-related tourism is an incredible asset for our territories to grow again. Some of the most recent decrees that were put out by our government were not very favorable for this sector, and therefore we must work even harder to make sure that our towns and villages don't lose their ability to appeal tourists any more than they already have. And the hope is to get back on the right track. From next spring, we're going to face a very harsh and a very difficult cold season. And as an institution, we are at everyone's disposal in order to work together in this direction. Thank you very much, Mr. Corbini, for your interesting description. We are now leaving the floor to our the third speaker of the day, who is Mr. Marcello Astori, the General Manager of Zani Viaggi. And our question for you, sir, is this. What are the most important strategic aids that the travel and tourism sector could benefit from, especially in such a particular time such as this? Good afternoon, everybody. I would like to begin by presenting Zani Viaggi, the company I represent. Zani Viaggi is the first tour operator in the city of Milan, and we focus mostly on tourists visiting large cities such as Milan, Rome, or Florence. These big cities share very similar challenges and problems. And in our case, we have experienced a drop from 1.5 million passengers last year to 150,000 this year, which is obviously a huge loss. Large artistic cities in Italy have been hit very, very hard by the pandemic. They used to be the main targets for tourists from around the world. And that type of tourism is almost entirely shut down at the moment. And the few tourists who do come are experiencing relevant limitations in their access to museums and their access to places of interest due to COVID-related restrictions and social distancing. And let me say that some of those regulations don't really make that much sense, such as, for example, 5-person access to a 300 or 400 square meter room. The goal is to kickstart 2021 with the right foot, because winter 2020 will be very, very difficult for this sector. The main support that I believe can be given to the kind of tourism that I represent is an improved communication with the various institutions and between the various institutions involved, in order to have a sort of round table and facilitate planning so that when the pandemic finally slows down, we will be ready to start attracting visitors right away. Because the main reason for visiting cities such as Milan or Rome is the artistic beauty that those cities can offer. If one is to visit Rome for the first time, that visitor will expect and demand to be able to visit the Colosseum. In my business, we are actually experiencing a lot of problems in carrying out a meaningful dialogue with a lot of those institutions in order to facilitate tourist access to museums and artistic structures in general in the big cities. And improving this dialogue would be a very, very good start. We really need to sit around the table and really ask ourselves, what do we want to do next year? What do we want next year to look like? And this is what we mostly lack right now. There is a lack of a strategic vision for the future. And this is a huge limit that we need to overcome. Let me share an example from my experience. Every time I talk to clients from New York, for example, who ask me to visit the Cenacolo in Milan and ask me to organize a visit for them, for example, a visit for a group of 20 people, I will be in a very, very difficult position to get that visit organized because of the lack of communication that I just spoke about. So I will not be in the position of setting up their visit right away just with a phone call or an email. And this is likely to cause disappointment and bad publicity from those clients back home. There is a kind of wall between our businesses and those institutions which we're supposed to have a smooth communication with. And that wall was already very high before the pandemic, and it is fundamental to lower that wall or to break it down completely, because if Italian museums don't talk to companies such as ours, companies that are supposed to bring people to those museums, then we can expect nothing but long queues, unhappy visitors, and a very, very bad image for our country in general. So this kind of network is the main boost that we can generate without involving money or financial investments, which of course we do need very, very much. Banks are supporting the travel and tourism industry right now, but what we need is not only a financial support, but a systemic support, so that the private and the public sector can communicate and cooperate in order to set up strategic goals for the future. So that we can avoid a Colosseum situation, for example, where the ticket issuing regulations are changed every 3 months. And the reason I mentioned the Colosseum is just because that's an example that I'm familiar with, but we do have very, very similar situations here in Milan and in a lot of other big cities around the country. And so the communication flow is probably the main challenge that we need to face as soon as possible. And this is the right time to create such a synergy, because everything is on a standstill. We must invest on the reasons why Italy is known and appreciated around the world, which is its beauties. And those beauties must be made as accessible as possible, because the first thing that people will do as soon as this is all over will be to move and travel again. People will have a deep desire for traveling and moving, and to me, it doesn't really make sense that we don't know how this sector will behave and how this sector will look like in 6 months from now. So this is my opinion on how to help businesses at a zero cost in order to reboost the travel and tourism sector in this country. Mr. Astori, your talk has been extremely exhaustive at pointing out some of the main strategic aids for the travel and tourist sector from the perspective of Zani Viaggi in particular. Let's now move on to the fourth speaker of the day, Mr. Roberto Micera, who is an expert from the National Research Council. And our question is, how does your institution operate, and what is the way forward for the travel and tourist sector? Thank you very much for this invitation today. It's extremely appreciated, and thank you very much as well for the opportunity to be involved in the forum, and a special thanks, of course, goes out to its main creator, Mr. Matteo Redenti. We're obviously very, very interested in future collaborations, and I am personally very, very involved with the Mediterranean area that I have been working closely with for quite some time. The NRS, the National Research Council, has been doing research on the tourism sector for many, many years, focusing mostly on a variety of different disciplines, but a particular focus on travelers' destinations and cultural heritage. The Institute for Mediterranean Studies was established in 2019 with the aim of focusing on more economic aspects related to tourism business management, and to try to understand the new patterns and the new phenomena that are developing in this sector. And we're also trying to establish a network and to fill a gap between the tourism sector and the policymakers. And the NRS also has a very privileged connection with the Enterprise Europe network that we work very, very actively and closely with. As far as the most recent months are concerned, of course, we can't avoid to face what is going on. We're living very, very strange times. And we're working actively with both national and international colleagues in order to better understand the necessary steps and the necessary strategies to apply. We are clearly going through a critical time. According to the WTTO and according to OXE, we have experienced a worldwide loss of 440 million international arrivals between January and June 2020. At the same time, Italy has lost around 24 billion euros with a complete shutdown of a huge number of travel and tourism businesses. And this loss in the number of visitors is actually expected to reach a total of a 50% drop compared to the available data from last year, with around 172 million visitors less than last year. And so what are the strategies that have been put in place so far to face this crisis, and what's the possible road, and what's the possible strategy that we can apply from here on? First of all, of course, we must prevent tourism businesses and companies from failing completely and from going bankrupt. And this is achieved through, of course, through the different ministerial decrees that were approved by our government, including special aids and funds for this sector, including protecting workers, subsidizing wages, and supporting companies to go through this very difficult time. We are talking of about 8 to 10 billion euros that is going to be provided to this sector in order to prevent businesses from going bankrupt. But such actions are supposed to prevent the sector from failing completely, but at the same time, what we are convinced we should do is to expand our vision and to try and understand what we want the future to look like. As Mr. Astori actually pointed out during his speech, some mid and long-term tools and strategies have been provided and have been and we're trying to put those strategies in motion in order to face this crisis, such as the recovery fund plan, for example. But at the same time, we need to go back to some of the instruments that were already existing before the pandemic, because all these tools, the old ones and the new ones, represent a great opportunity if they are properly used simultaneously in order to improve travelers' trust and confidence in traveling safely. So these tools and these strategies are there for us to use, but we are lacking the necessary conditions to be able to use them properly and quickly. Of course, the visitor, the traveler, is supposed to be at the core of the entire strategic process. Italy must avoid to lose competitiveness by investing in marketing and digitalization, but on top of all this, we need to understand if the conditions are ready for such projects and such strategies to begin and to be applied with a shared vision and a shared plan. Some smaller sectors must be enhanced and discovered thanks to careful marketing strategies. I'm referring to sectors such as slow tourism, the wine and food sector, which was touched by one of the previous speakers, as well as the large cultural cities, which were also discussed by one of the previous speakers. And we need to re-enhance all these sectors by creating the right connections between the various players who are involved. But of course, it is clear for everybody that we must also deal with the healthcare and the sanitary rules that we will all have to face in the near future. And we need to understand what the next steps are going to be in order to fight this virus. Very, very nice presentation indeed. We thank you very much, Mr. Micera, for sharing such a broad and deep overview of the tourist system in this country and what the tourist system in this country has been going through. And we're moving on now, and the floor is for our fifth guest of the day, Mr. Yossi Wircer, who is the owner of Hotel Development Europe.
Welcome, Yossi.
Thank you very much for inviting me for the Mediterranean podcast. I am based in Poland, but my heart and my soul is in the Mediterranean, being an Israeli. So you may imagine that I am there in my spirit. But in any case, let me introduce myself for a second. I'm an executive senior hotelier, 44 years in the business. My company is a management, consulting, and asset management company. Under my wings, there's few brands. I manage actively the Holiday Inn Krakow City Center. I am asset manager for Hilton Doubletree in Wrocław and the Granary, part of the small luxury hotels of the world. I am consulting for developers in Krakow, Autograph by Marriott. And interesting enough, I'm also consulting for developers in Remezina in Lake Como.
Okay.
So it is going to be a Waldorf Astoria, beautiful property in that way. That's
okay, Yossi. Thank you very much for your introduction. And for you is this question: what is Hotel Development Europe? And in your experience, how is going hotellery market now?
okay. I can sum it up with one word: catastrophe. But to be more elaborate, I can also imagine yourself standing on a bonfire and having a bunch of notes of money, and you putting every time another note into the fire. Now, to be more elaborating about this issue, I can only give you an example of Krakow. But also in Israel, which I'm very well connected, as I've been there for 23 years. I was working for Sheraton in Israel in different positions. So I'm very well connected to that area too. The hotel business really in a dire state. When the pandemic started in March, the quarantine was nearly worldwide, where hotels were closed for 2 months. At that time, it was a shocking event to everybody. Nobody expected it. In my 44 years of career, I never was able to deal with it, where I had to go and see where we can deal with the situation and how we can deal with the situation. To tell you the truth, a major role here in putting us a bit on the optimistic side was some governments. In this case, the Polish government given a subsidy to hotels to help them not to fire the people. So in my case, I was able to keep 50% of my staff at working situation. The subsidy is good till June next year, which means I cannot do anything else except keep the people. Otherwise, the subsidies will be taken away. So the example, for example, last year, September, the city, in my case, the Krakow City Center, Holiday Inn, we had 96% occupancy. We opened in June this year. In September, I had 15% occupancy. So that's the magnitude of the situation. In order to deal with the situation, what we do is basically applying and working with the local market. It's the only market that we can really deal with, because the group from South America, from America, are not coming, and they will not come for a long time. The Asian group are not coming, and they would not come for a long time. Business people are working from home, so that movement is also not traveling. So the only place where you can do it, can affect some changes is in the local market, and that's what we are trying to do, and get the local market to go into the hotels. The government helps also by the Polish government in this case, by giving to each family with a kid, for each kid, 500 zlotys to spend in the hotel environment. So that's the government help. The way I see it, things would not change until there will be a vaccine. And when there will be a vaccine, it will take some time. It will take some time, and it will be at least till next spring, if not the summer, where the situation will improve. However, I don't think 2021 is going to be a beautiful year. I do think 2022 will be the recovery year. That's my personal focus.
Thank you very much, Yossi, for your very interesting and important speech. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we have reached the last speaker of the day, the last speaker of this second webinar. And joining us today is Mr. Arben Shkodra, who is the Secretary General of the Albanian Manufacturer Union. And our question is, what are the main investments in the travel and tourism sector in your home country of Albania? Thank you very much for the invitation and for your question. I would like to begin by talking a little bit about some pretty interesting facts. Albania is right across the sea from Italy, but was only discovered as a tourist destination around 10 years ago. The situation prior to that was actually quite difficult due to political reasons over the last 30 years. But more recently, Albania has been rediscovering its traditions and its strengths and its potential. We have 400 kilometers of coastline facing the Adriatic as well as the Ionio Sea, and seaside tourism is active in Albania for almost 6 months a year, thanks to our weather. Seaside tourism is combined with cultural tourism. We have 2 UNESCO World Heritage Sites here and soon to be 3. So the combination of seaside culture as well as culinary tourism, this combination will be really powerful. Because a lot of tourists are getting tired of 5-star hotels where everything is the same. They are getting tired of the same old destinations. and they're showing some interest in discovering new places and new destinations. And Albania represents a very interesting opportunity in this sense. Another very important aspect, especially as far as Italian tourism is concerned, is the language aspect. 60% of Albanians are fluent in Italian, which means that almost all travel and tourism workers in Albania can communicate with Italian visitors effortlessly. And of course, this has led to a remarkable increase in Italian tourism over the last 10 years, reaching a total of 5 million tourists a year, which is not exactly a shocking number, but it's a steadily growing number. Czech, Polish, Italians, Germans, all these different nationalities are discovering our country and find a different kind of experience here. As far as infrastructures are concerned, we have one international airport and another one on the way, which is currently being built in the north of the country in order to enhance and stimulate mountain tourism. And we have a third airport in the south in order to enable people and visitors to reach the Ionio areas in the south of the country. Before the outbreak of the pandemic, we were also experiencing some very, very interesting growth in wellness tourism. Over the last few years, we have set up some clinics. We have built some clinics here for hair transplant as well as teeth. And we have actually witnessed a tremendous success in this kind of tourism, also amongst Italian visitors. We have imported a lot of know-how and a lot of R&D into the country, mainly from Turkey. Turkey was one of the very first countries to invest in this kind of tourism. And so we have brought healthcare professionals into our market. And then the pandemic came, and we had a very similar standstill that many other countries experienced, including Italy. We have gone from 5 million visitors a year, which I have mentioned before, to roughly 700,000 or 800,000. And the travel and tourism sector in Albania was not subsidized by the government, unfortunately, or at least not yet. Even though a recovery plan is being worked out, is currently on the way, and the tourism sector will likely be included in this new plan. On top of all these, we have great multinational corporations such as Hilton or Hyatt and many more, which are entering our market. a law has recently been passed in Albania with regards to casinos, and the license has been assigned to 5-star hotels only. But this is an ongoing situation, of course, due to the lockdown. A hotel is currently being renovated. Marriott has already finished their own hotel in Tirana, and different seaside resorts are also being built. But I will close by saying that I fully agree with the previous speaker with regards to 2022 being the real recovery year, instead of 2021. That's 2022 when we will probably begin to concretely and tangibly fill the holes that were created by this pandemic. So we have reached the end of our webinar today. I would like to share my thanks with all the speakers for being with us today and for sharing their knowledge and experience with us on such an important topic as the aids for the tourism sector. This webinar is a preview to the main forum, which will be held in the town of Vigevano during spring 2021. And you are all warmly invited to join us again next Thursday for our next discussion, our third discussion, which will deal with European and extra-European fundings, as well as international cooperation. Thank you very much, and see you next time.